Nutanix offers a version of their popular hyperconverged virtualization stack called NutanixCE or Community Edition that can be installed and used in your home lab, but getting it up and running is an involved process. So like those pharmaceutical ads say, it's time to ask your doctor if NutanixCE is right for you. Let's get to it. This video is brought to you by HomeLab Gear. My home lab was a mess, so I designed and created a variety of different products to help me manage and protect all of my gear, and now they're available for you too. Tackle the storage of your countless 3.5-inch mechanical drives, organize all of your random 2.5-inch SSDs, protect all of your delicate NVMe SSDs, store all of your DDR DIMMs and those easy to misplace SODIMMs, and collect and protect all of your expensive SFP transceivers. You can get all of these right now too. Just head over to our shop at homelabgear.shop or check for a link in the description and get your home lab organized. Now back to the video. Hey there, home labbers, self-hosters, IT pros, and engineers. Rich here. As promised, we are off to the races with the first video using the new 4-node host we built a few videos back. Check out that video if you haven't seen it yet. In this video, we'll be installing NutanixCE on one of those nodes and then walking through also building out a cluster with the other 3 nodes. Stick around to the end of the video for my final thoughts because I have a few things to say. With that, let's get going. Our first stop here is to talk about the minimum hardware requirements because NutanixCE won't run on a potato. Alright, let's talk about the hardware requirements for NutanixCE. First off, the processor. NutanixCE requires either Intel or AMD CPUs with virtualization support with a minimum of 4 cores, with 2 of those cores used for the dedicated controller VM or CVM. For memory, Nutanix requires a minimum of 16 GB with 32 GB or higher recommended for better performance and additional features like deduplication and compression. On to storage. NutanixCE uses 2 tiers of storage. You'll need at least one SSD with a minimum of 200 GB for their hot tier storage. Additional SSDs or hard disks are recommended for the cold tier of storage with a 500 GB minimum recommended. And let's not forget a dedicated disk of at least 8 GB or greater for the installation of AHV or the Acropolis hypervisor. The docs say you can use a USB stick for this, but I'm going to tell you right now, this is a bad idea. For networking, you'll need at least one Intel-based NIC 1 gigabit or faster. If you're building a cluster, you'll want 10 gigabit or greater for storage replication, and the more NICs, the better. I have read that Nutanix will support Realtek NICs, but your mileage may vary. Alright, before we get started with this process, I wanted to take a quick moment to explain the components of Nutanix, the Acropolis hypervisor, and the controller virtual machine, also known as the CVM. It's important you understand these things because it differs from VMware ESXi, Proxmox, XCP-ng, and Hyper-V. The hypervisor for Nutanix and NutanixCE is known as the Acropolis hypervisor or AHV. AHV uses KVM to run virtual machines, but that's the extent of its functionality. Everything else in NutanixCE, from the storage to the GUI, is managed by the Controller Virtual Machine or CVM. The CVM is a virtual machine that's responsible for basically everything except the actual running of virtual machines. As mentioned previously, storage management, the GUI, cluster management, data replication, and so on are all managed by the CVM, and each deployment of the Acropolis hypervisor requires its own CVM. One quick note about the CVM, it is easily the largest consumer of base resources when you deploy Nutanix. This really isn't a good or bad thing, it's just the way Nutanix is designed. And from an enterprise deployment perspective, it's not really a concern when you're provisioning out a cluster where each host has, say, a good 384 gigabytes of RAM. But for people in a home lab setting where resources are more constrained, it might be a deal breaker. Alright, all of that out of the way, let's get to downloading NutanixCE and installing it. The first stop is to grab a copy of NutanixCE to install. To do this, we'll head over to nutanix.com/products/community-edition/register. You'll need to provide a business email address to download CE. What is a business email, you ask? Well, it's anything but Gmail, Outlook, Yahoo, etc., etc. Basically, any email address you can get for free on the internet from the likes of Google, Microsoft, Yahoo, etc. will not be accepted. And here's where we get to my first complaint about Nutanix. By giving them your information, you'll get a call and email from somebody at Nutanix, which is incredibly annoying. You know, just checking in to see what your interests are in Nutanix. It's pretty clear that they're using NutanixCE as a way to get customers into their sales funnel. Now, I've had conversations with people who work in Nutanix and they agree this isn't great, but it's not their call. So, I want to be totally clear with any Nutanix people who might be watching this. If your intention is to build a community around your product, get them excited about using it in their home lab, and maybe even adopting it into the businesses that they work for, don't call them on the phone or pester them with emails just checking in. The first time I downloaded NutanixCE, I got a phone call in a few hours, and that is unacceptable. Anyway, Moving on. After a beat, you should receive an email that looks like this with a link to download NutanixCE. However, when you open that link, you'll land on a 403 forbidden page because you gotta log in to download the install ISO. So we'll head over and click Login below. Funny story, you don't technically have an account with Nutanix yet, you just gave them your contact information, so you need to click Sign Up Now to create an account. I, however, have already gone through that pain, so I'm just gonna log in with my account details to speed this along. Once logged in, we finally land on the page the link in the email was intended to send us to in the first place. This forum post has everything you're going to need to at least get started with NutanixCE. This forum post is also, at least at the time of this video, 3 years old, but it has the links to download the install ISO for NutanixCE, as well as links to download VirtIO guest tools for Windows, so grab those while you're here. Support for NutanixCE is purely done via the community and this forum, so bookmark it in case you need help. This is where you're going to go. Let's download the NutanixCE installer ISO by clicking the link. Alright, this is Rufus, a free ISO to USB creation tool that we've used countless times in other videos. Head over to https://rufus.ie and grab a copy for your tools. You'll be happy you did. Anyway, creating a bootable install disk is as easy as starting Rufus, inserting a USB stick that's 8 GB or larger into your computer, selecting the NutanixCE ISO that you just downloaded from Nutanix, clicking Start, agreeing to the deletion of any existing data on the USB stick, and being patient while it finishes. Alright, all done, let's prep for the install. We need to do some homework really quickly before we start the installation. NutanixCE, depending on the amount of nodes you're planning on building up, can require a lot of IP addresses, and it's best to get all that information written down before you deploy so you're not panicking trying to choose those free addresses. Each NutanixCE node requires a minimum of 2 IP addresses, one for the AHV hypervisor and one for the CVM running within. It's much easier to plan and write out these things ahead of time, especially if you're going to deploy more than one node. Here's my worksheet. I'm deploying 4 nodes, and I have their IP address configurations filled in, and I validated that the IP addresses I'm going to use are not currently in use on my network. You don't have to get this creative, just write it down on a piece of paper. For the sake of time and my sanity, I'm only going to show the installation of one of the nodes, and you can just imagine me doing the same process 3 more times. The process is literally rinse and repeat. Alright, let's get our first node installed. I'm using the IPMI interfaces of the hosts to install NutanixCE. So during this initial portion of the install, you're going to see some screen resizing happening during the process. The first step here is to boot your hardware off of the USB stick. Doing this will require you to know how to do so with your hardware. Sometimes it's as easy as hitting F11, other times you need to boot into your system's BIOS to enable. Once you've successfully booted off the stick, you should see the Nutanix Phoenix Grub bootloader appear for a moment. Let the install boot up and be patient. The thing takes a while to get going, like a solid 7 minutes for me, so your mileage may vary. This is the Nutanix Community Edition installer text-based GUI. Our first stop here is to select which hypervisor we'll be using. Yes, Nutanix does support using ESXi as the underlying hypervisor. That was originally how Nutanix got started, and I suspect in the longer term that option will go away. We want to install NutanixCE on the full Nutanix stack, and to do that, we'll want to use AHV. So we'll leave the X where it is and hit Tab. This section is where we want to define how we want to deploy or provision our storage to our host. My system has dual 500GB NVMe SSDs and 6 500GB SATA SSDs. Obviously, your deployment is going to look different. By default, the installer will take a swag at what it thinks is the best deployment approach based on the gear it detects. In my case, it wants to use the 2 NVMe SSDs for the CVM, one of the SATA SSDs for the hypervisor install, and the other 5 for the data tier. This is exactly what I would have configured it to do anyway, so I'm going to leave it as is. You can massage your storage configuration as necessary, but I highly recommend you make sure you provision at least one of your fastest storage devices to the CVM for caching and performance reasons. Once you've made your choices, we'll hit Tab to drop to the next section. Alright, now we need to configure the IP addressing for both the AHV hypervisor and the CVM running within. This is where that worksheet I made you do before comes in handy, assuming you did one. We'll enter in our address for the node now, using the arrow keys to move between fields. For those of you who aren't doing a multi-node cluster, you can absolutely check the box to create a single node cluster and make your life much easier. We, however, are shooting for the full 4-node cluster, so we'll leave that unchecked and move on to the next page. Alright, what good software doesn't have a mile-long EULA to accept, and NutanixCE is no exception. Here's the thing, you need to scroll to the bottom of this EULA or your installer will fail and force you back to go through the process again. Use page down to do the EULA shuffle to the bottom, and then hit space to accept the EULA, and then tab over to start and press enter. And now friends, we wait. Turnaround time to install completion took my hardware a solid 15 minutes to complete. Once the install is done, you'll be asked if you want to reboot the host. We'll say yes to reboot and move on to the next steps. When all is done and booted back up, all you'll ever see on the console will be just the Nutanix AHV login prompt. Yes, that took a very long time to install, and my gear really isn't even that old either. Thankfully, Nutanix runs much faster than it installs. Now, if you're only doing a single node install and you check the box in the installer, you can jump over to Prism and start using your NutanixCE now. If, however, you're going to run in a cluster of 3 or 4 hosts, we have more steps to complete. Our next step here is to provision and deploy out our cluster, and until we've done this, NutanixCE is unusable. Cluster deployment is done via the command line, and you can do this either via the console of your host or via SSH, which is the way that I'm going to do this. The good news is we only have to do this process once and only from one of the CVMs to build out our cluster. With that, let's get our cluster built now. We'll be passing through the AHV host to the CVM on our first node to build the cluster. Our first stop is to SSH into AHV on our first node. To do this, we'll type SSH root at 172.24.1.200, which is the IP address I assigned to AHV on my first node, and press enter. Our first time SSHing into this host prompts us to trust the host. We'll say yes and hit enter. The default password for the root account on AHV is Nutanix/4u, all lowercase, so we'll type that in and hit enter. Alright, we've successfully logged into our AHV host. Our next step is to SSH into the CVM that's running within the host. To log into the CVM, we'll type in SSH Nutanix at 172.24.1.201, 201 being the IP address I defined for CVM on this host, and now we'll hit enter. The default password for the Nutanix user is again Nutanix/4u, all lowercase, and hit enter. Alright, if you've been following through on our little game of Inception here, we've SSH'd into the AHV host and then SSH'd into the controller virtual machine on the AHV host. Up to speed? Good. Alright, let's create the cluster. We'll type cluster-s, and then we'll enter every CVM IP address we previously created separated by a comma, followed by the word create. Double check your addresses and syntax before continuing. If it's all good, press enter. Now sit back and relax as the cluster creation process takes a while to complete. Alright, as long as you see success at the bottom, your cluster has successfully been completed and you're good to move on. The next step is to start our newly created cluster. Type in cluster, start, and hit enter to kick that off. Starting the cluster doesn't take nearly as long. Our next stop is to define the name of our cluster. To do this, we'll type in ncli cluster edit-params new-name equals, and then the name of your cluster. We'll call ours 2gt-cluster. Once you've entered in that command correctly, press enter. Okay, our next step is to create the cluster IP address. The cluster IP address is the primary address for interacting with Prism, the web interface of Nutanix. To set up your cluster IP address, type in ncli cluster set-external-ip-address external-ip-address equals, and then the IP address you wish to use. We'll be using 172.24.1.210 as our cluster IP address. When you've filled that in with your information, press enter. From this point, you're technically finished. Quit out of both consoles and let's jump into Prism using the cluster IP that we just set up, and let's see if everything works. Alright, let's head over to the cluster IP address and see if Prism answers. For me, that's going to be http 172.24.1.210, and we'll hit enter. And of course, we're presented with a self-signed certificate, so we'll skip past the warning and land on the Prism login page. Default user is admin, and the password again is Nutanix/4u, all lowercase. Prism is requiring us to change the default password, so we'll do that now. And we'll log back in with admin and our new password. Next step is to enter our Nutanix Next credentials. To use NutanixCE, you're explicitly agreeing to allow metrics and telemetry to be sent back to Nutanix. This is tracked by your Nutanix user account that you created to download the CE ISO. Enter those credentials now. And here we are. Welcome to the dashboard of your NutanixCE cluster. On the top left corner of the screen is a drop-down menu to access different aspects of NutanixCE. We're on the home dashboard now, so let's swing through a few of these menu options. First stop, Health. On your first time accessing Health, Nutanix will walk you through a tour of the different parts of the Health page. For first-time users of Nutanix, it's helpful information, so take the time and take the quick tour. I'll close the tour and take a look at any alerts we have. And the alerts, while being a scary red color, aren't actually health alerts but warnings that the hosts and the CVMs have default passwords set for them. This is something I can take care of later. What's most important is that all of my hardware is up and healthy. Moving on. Next stop is the VM section. We don't have any VMs running on any of our hosts at the moment outside of the CVMs, which are hidden by default, but if we did, we'd see details about the VMs here. Now on to storage. In the storage overview, we see basic information about the storage system, including IOPS, quantities of running VMs, and any alerts if we had some. Again, this is a fresh installation, so all this information is largely blank. Next up is network. This overview shows you a visual representation of your hosts and how they're connected to the network. Nutanix also allows you to configure SNMP access to your network switching to pull detailed information from them if that's supported. Again, this is a fresh cluster, so there's not much here to report. The hardware section gives us a great overview of all of the hardware in our cluster, including overviews on CPU, memory, storage, bandwidth usage, IOPS, and so on. No alerts, no warnings, and no events is good news for a fresh cluster. In File Server, you can set up network shares to allow access to the HCI storage in your cluster. This will be useful for people who want to utilize their cluster's internal storage for more than just VMs. I'm sure someone somewhere uses this, but it's not something I'd use or set up in my home lab or business. Moving on. The data protection section is where you can configure snapshots, set up backup and restores for VMs and data, configure replication, DR, and a whole lot more. If you're interested in seeing content around this, let us know in the comments. The analysis section allows you to build charts and graphs of different metrics to monitor performance and events in your cluster. If you're the kind of person who loves drilling into data, you'll find yourself at home here. Alerts shows you all currently active alerts in your cluster. As you can see, I have 2 alerts mentioned previously about the default passwords. Tasks shows you current and completed tasks that are happening in your cluster. LCM is where you'll manage patching and updating all aspects of your NutanixCE infrastructure. It's a good idea after you're done watching this video to run through and update your new cluster and all of its supporting services before you press your new system into production. And the last section is settings. There are all manners of settings and configurations here that affect different aspects of your cluster. For example, if you want to add additional DNS servers for name resolution in your cluster, you do it here, as well as many, many more settings. All right, you made it this far. You've got NutanixCE installed. Congratulations. Now let's talk about this process and my thoughts on running NutanixCE in your home lab, because I have got some things to say. I'm going to lead with the positives. Nutanix is one of the nicest user experiences you can get. If you love data, the amount of graphing and metrics Nutanix gives you will blow your mind. I think that I mentioned it during the VMware comparison video. ESXi and vCenter don't have anything that comes close in comparison. CE from a home lab perspective is also great because it's basically fully unlocked and available for you to use, learn, and play. If your company is considering switching to Nutanix at work, the fact you can basically run an identical stack for free at home is phenomenal. I wish this was the end of the comments on CE, but it's not. If you ask me right now if NutanixCE in its current state is something you should run in your home lab, I'm gonna tell you no, it's not, and I'm gonna tell you why. First, the on-ramp from bare metal to functioning hypervisor is incredibly unfriendly to home labbers. Just getting a copy of NutanixCE requires you to have a business email address. Why? Because for Nutanix, signing up for the Community Edition is an on-ramp into their corporate sales funnel. Getting an email and phone call hours or days later after downloading it just to check in and see how Nutanix can work for you is not okay. At a minimum, it's a waste of your pre-sales people's time, and it's annoying as hell for us. Secondly, the installation process is ugly and unfriendly, and if you're not familiar with a lot of command line or GUI-less installations, you're gonna have a hard time. You can certainly follow through this tutorial, but I have a suspicion that if you run into any hardware or installation issues, you're gonna have a tough time recovering. The third issue is that the hardware requirements for Nutanix in general are going to put it out of reach of many home labbers. If you have enterprise gear like I do, knock yourself out. But if you're trying to make CE work on a 7 to 10-year-old Xeon with 16 gigabytes of RAM and a single 10 gigabyte mechanical hard disk, you need to look elsewhere. And I think the last complaint I have overall is that I'm not sure where NutanixCE is headed. Nutanix is a seriously viable HCI virtualization stack and replacement for VMware. But unlike VMware, before Broadcom screwed everything up, Nutanix really isn't putting much of any effort into the Community Edition that I can see. To see this for yourself, all you need to do is check the creation date on the ISO you downloaded. It has a creation date of 2022. All of that being said, it doesn't hurt to try out NutanixCE. At a minimum, you'll increase and improve your technical skills, and at a maximum, you'll end up with a badass HCI virtualization stack. As always, let me know down in the comments all of your NutanixCE opinions, successes, and failures. And that, friends, will do it for this video. If you liked it, throw us a sub and a like, and if you have a beef with anything I've said here, let me know in the comments below. Special thank you to YouTube members. You guys help keep the lights on, and we thank you for it. If you'd like to help support the channel, consider becoming a member or buying some of our swag. It all helps us keep making these videos. And now that you've finished watching this video, how about checking out this playlist over here of other great virtualization videos we've done in the past? If you're looking for your next great hypervisor, we can help.